Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Um, I hope that whatever inconveniences the snow has thrown at you, you can muddle through well enough. Uh, Thanks for coming out, and hopefully, the weather gives us a chance to go out and observe nature a little more than it has been of late in the near future. Uh, when that day comes, then I encourage you to look around at some of the organizations around us, whether it be on the Orange County Audubon Society, which manages 5 sanctuaries. Will hopefully, if snow allows, we in the first Tuesday of the month, we hope to have this month and every month. Like at the Heritage Trail at the 6.5 Station Sanctuary. And then there's between the Bashkill Area Association, which manages that precious wetland, and the Mamakating Environmental Education Center. And Charlotte, with us now, gives us such great monthly updates on that. This is a great place to go for events, and once again, snow permitting, the second Sunday of the month, we'll have a hike there. But there are so many other groups. There's a Sullivan County Audubon Society, a Mearns Bird Club, the Shawangunk Friends Organization, the Friends of the Wallkill Organization, the Gifford Pinchot Audubon Society. So we live in such a wonderful, wonderful area. Today, we'll be talking more about the underwater life. But if you wanted to get out and enjoy it or have some resources, I know there'll be occasions where I'll go to Meek and bring some microscopes where we do like look at some of the aquatic invertebrates I'll be talking about in just a few minutes. There's all of these great ways to experience nature. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to these organizations. They'd love to hear from you, and I'm sure they'd love to share with you their calendars and their events. So, especially as we start warming and going into the warmer weather, we'll be talking about, bald eagles and migrating waterfowl and all of the things we're going to start seeing in the spring migration. So I thought I would take some time here to talk about the aquatic life and the great aquatic diversity we have around us. Now, there is overlap between some of these different things. I thought I could just go right back to, sorry, I just want to go right back to oh, come on. These are all my audios. I just want to go to the picture of the bald eagles at the Bashkill. Um, so soon we'll be talking about bald eagles, but tonight's talk is on aquatic food chains. Here are two juveniles frolicking. I got pictures of these, I think, 2 weeks ago. Um, Obviously, these are parts of the aquatic food chains that we're talking about tonight. And so there will be overlap between all of these weeks, but I wanted to look at the great biodiversity of aquatic life around us. And I thought I would do it in 4 stages. One, talk about all the little critters. Two, talk about the fish we find in our areas. And then three, start looking then elsewhere, because just like, if you were to look at birds in one part of the country or the world, they would be different from those of another. I'd like to go to the Galapagos and other places in Latin America, in addition to the Caribbean, and just kind of look at the compare and contrast the diversity you would see. Okay. So, beginning. All right. I like aquatic life, and soon we'll be seeing great blue herons, and here's one eating this huge catfish. Here you can see there's all of these trout, and lots of people appreciate them for diverse reasons. I already showed you the eagle. Obviously, these are at the tops of food chains, and they wouldn't be there if then there were animals closer to the bottoms of the food chains, whether they be smaller fish or then these invertebrates here. Some of these invertebrates are so small, you really need a microscope to see them. So that's a surprise that I think a lot of people, it takes a while to adjust themselves to. A lot of animals are microscopic. And so our study of the life in aquatic ecosystems begins very small. But on land, it kind of starts the same way, where we would want to start with plants and photosynthesis on land, because the green stuff grabs energy from the sun, and then makes the biomolecules that then the animals then eat. That's where we animals, we get our sugars, our proteins, etc., from these plants that do photosynthesis. And the aquatic ecosystems, it's the same. In fact, some bacteria are green. We call them blue-green algae often, but they're not algae. They are cyanobacteria. And here you can find them in ponds in our area. So these guys actually even move a little bit. And not only are they doing photosynthesis, but also many of them are able to trap nitrogen, which is something that not many organisms can do. So I need nitrogen every single day. I need it for my proteins, I need it for my DNA, but I can't make it. All right. Animals can't make it. In fact, the only things that can take nitrogen gas out of the air and put it into biomolecules are microbes like the cyanobacteria. And so these bacteria, which are green, are really important at the bottoms of food chains. If we were to go farther up the food chains, all right, once again, here you can see photosynthetic organisms are really important. Here's an aquatic mammal, the muskrat, eating green things. But at a smaller scale, look at all of the green algae. So this isn't blue-green algae, which are bacteria. These are bigger cells with nuclei, and they are green. But algae come in other colors. So if you were to go to a pond near your house, you would find some which look brownish. This is what's called a diatom. Now, most people don't know very much about diatoms. They're a type of algae, a lot in the ocean, and that's okay. But diatoms do as much photosynthesis and they produce as much oxygen as all the world's rainforests. So I know, like, if you were to say, "Oh, let's talk about really important, aspects of nature which contribute to, the well-being of the planet and food systems." Once again, diatoms often don't come up, but rainforests do. But these guys, they, are just as important as the rainforest in the terms of the amount of photosynthesis that they do. Now, I hate to jump ahead and be a spoiler, but I'll jump ahead anyway. All right, I was in Baja California uh, in December. And obviously, one of the highlights of Baja California was I got to see dolphins. They're jumping up here and there. All right. And I got to see whales. I even got to see a whale breach, which was awesome. That was my first time seeing a whale breach. So, we're talking about aquatic food chains. There are the whales, but obviously they have to be eating stuff. All right. So they're eating little critters like krill and other aquatic invertebrates. What are those krill and aquatic invertebrates eating? They're eating algae like the diatoms. The diatoms are very abundant in the ocean. And so once again, if you say, I love whales, that's great. Who doesn't love whales? But these diatoms are in their food chains. Without the photosynthetic organisms at the bottom of the food chains, you're not getting the whales and the great blue herons and the bald eagles, etc. There are different kinds of green algae which aren't even related to each other. This one can actually swim like with a flagellum. There are different kinds of brown algae as well. So this is a little cluster of cells that you could even find in your backyard. And I'll mention it as a minor point now, but it's a major point in just a little bit. Photosynthetic cells sometimes live inside bigger cells. And so here is a ciliate swimming around. But if you notice how green it is, so it's eaten algae. But instead of fully digesting them, the algae are going to kind of live inside and they form a team where the big cell feeds the little algae and the algae give it sugar that they get from the sun. Now, this is a minor example of that, but when we talk about corals, that's essentially all corals are about. So just like food chains begin with photosynthesis on land, we could say the same in nature. And then we could say that here as well. All right, so just if you have a chance, that would be great if you could mute yourself. But if not, let me just kind of, there's some background noise. Go. Okay. So why am I showing you this picture? Well, look at all the leaves. They're falling in the pond. So there's energy here. Like, that you can take dead branches and you can start a fire. You can release this energy. You can heat your house with wood. You can burn leaves, etc. There's energy there. So when it falls into this pond, then the dead molecules are there to be to undergo decomposition. And so as we start looking at where energy comes from, not only from algae, but also from dead leaves, dead branches, dead plant matter, which happens to fall in. So then there's all of these decomposers, like here are some fungi, which can decompose some of that. And then we have a whole bunch of animals, which can help as well. So these animals start off as small. I'll bet you've never seen a rotifer. They're tiny. You don't see them without a microscope. But if you were to take pond water, you say, oh, look at this little guy flying around. This little guy is eating the blue-green algae. It's eating other forms of algae. But also, see all the debris here? A lot of that is like dead leaf stuff. And these animals can help decompose that. But wait, there's more. So we have arthropods. So there's a couple which are called water fleas. This would be one called Daphnia. And once again, you can just barely see it without a microscope. But here it is. It gets to eat all of the rotting plant material. It gets to eat a lot of algae, a lot of the bacteria. So that's what keeps it going. And it has a cousin called Daphnia that does the same. It's carrying a lot of eggs around with it, so a lot of these little critters are actually pretty good parents. While they'll keep their young with them for a while. That you can see the eggs and embryos there. There's so many more. I'm just going to zip through them. This thing looks like a little clam, but it's not. It's related to the arthropods, like crayfish and insects and spiders and the like. But there's a lot of these microscopic arthropods which form parts of the zooplankton. Arthropods make up most of what I'm going to talk about in this little playlist that I'm zipping through, but there's more. So, for example, here's a worm. Most people have never seen a nematode worm, even though they are one of the most abundant groups of living of animals alive. The world is full of nematodes. Most of them are microscopic. We do care about them a little when they cause disease. But if you were to go to a pond near you, you'd find nematodes everywhere. Once again, they're eating bacteria, algae, little animals, and then other things will eat them. Right, let me just go through a few more arthropods, then we'll get to the bugs. So here's a little arthropod called a copepod. You're going to hear the term pod a lot. Pod is Latin for foot, like a podiatrist is a foot doctor. And so a lot of the names of these groups are describing their feet. Like amphipods have two different kinds of feet, where isopods have only one kind of foot. So that's what their names actually mean. So this little critter, it is breathing using some of its feet. So they just keep kicking and creating a water current so that the water can bring oxygen to them while they hunt with the front parts of their front legs. So they have two kinds of feet. That's what their name means. And they're different from the isopods where all their feet are the same. So that's an isopod there. All right. So we have a whole bunch of arthropods. There are things that aren't arthropods too. There's different types of worms. Worm is actually a weird word in that we say, oh, look, it's a worm. But there's a whole bunch of living things called worms that aren't related to each other hardly at all. So these worms, these are flatworms. They're hardly at all related to the nematode worms that I showed you a minute ago. And this one's kind of weird because you'd think it's like a segmented animal. But really what's going on here is this first gob, that's kind of like one organism that then had a kid, but the kid stayed attached to it for a while. So that's kind of like the next segment. And it had a kid, and then that's kind of like the next section that's attached to it. And they'll just kind of all go out as like this family, chain until one decides to break, and then they can like break off from after a while. So that's a worm. Planaria are worms. They're another group of flatworm here. You can find these in little in freshwater near us. And then we have such a diversity of snails in our area. So, whether it be lakes or the Delaware River, not only will you see snails there, you see lots of different kinds of snails. Okay. So even before we start talking about the insects, there's, just this great diversity of aquatic life at the food chains. And then you get the insects. Now, some of the insects are larvae. So here's what a baby mosquito looks like. So when a mosquito hatches from an egg, it looks like this. And then just like a butterfly is a caterpillar for a while before it comes its cocoon to become the adult, then this mosquito larvae, the same thing would applies. Forgive me, I'm just going to mute someone. Okay, thank you so very much for muting. Um, there's a bunch of insects that look very different from the adult form in an aquatic larval stage. So here's a damselfly. Damselflies are just absolutely beautiful when they're adults, but they spend the first part of their lives underwater, breathing from gills from the tip of their abdomen. So a lot of bugs are actually breathing through their butts, kind of. So here is one with external gills attached to the tip of its abdomen. So these are the damselfly larvae. Dragonfly larvae, they actually kind of suck water into their butts in order to breathe. And I have them somewhere. You find different aquatic larvae in different habitats. So stonefly larvae, they are very flat, and that helps them like attach to rocks where there's a current, like in the Delaware River. So if you go to the Delaware River, you turn over a rock, you would see some of these. Okay, no worries. Okay. So that is a stonefly larvae. And once again, when they come out as adults, they look different. So the flat larva you just saw a minute ago, um, this is what they look like as adults. I know, I certainly think this, that um, at the adult stage is the main stage. But for a lot of insects, like an adult stage might only last a day. Like things like mayflies, all right, they actually spend most of their lives as larvae, and in these cases, aquatic larvae. That's the main part of the life cycle. Once they come out as an adult, they just want to mate and before they die. All right, and so there'll be a time of year, so you'll just see stoneflies everywhere. Here I'm along the Delaware River. They're just everywhere because there's a very narrow window where you can find them. They're just mating, laying eggs before they die. There's lots of different kinds. So this looks like a weird thing, but that's actually a fly. It's what's called a snipe fly, but this is what their young look like. And then there are some midges which actually can live in oxygen poor water because they have iron, kind of like we have hemoglobin that makes our blood look red. They can bind oxygen with a red pigment. So these are what are called bloodworms. This will grow up to be a fly. So there are a lot of larvae which exist in aquatic environments. Here's a dragonfly larva. And a lot of them can get pretty big and even feed on baby fish. So dragonfly larvae, they have an extendable proboscis, right? And some of them are quite large. So that's a pretty big dragonfly larva. Here's this big mouth part that it has that can reach out and grab its prey like a baby fish. Um, and so these are parts of these aquatic food chains. And not only do we find larval insects in water, we find adults, a lot of the beetles. So here's a small beetle that is in um, a small beetle that you can find in water. Here's a larger beetle called um, diving beetles. There are different kinds of beetles. And then there are what are called hemipterans or sucking insects. This would include giant water bugs. Giant water bugs can get so big that not only can they feed on fish, they can actually even bring down a young duck on occasion. Most of the hemipterans are a little smaller than that. So for example, creeping water bugs, these are also sucking insects, as are back swimmers. And let me just kind of tie up this group. So they swim on their backs with these really long um, hind legs. Right. And as I wrap this up, there are just so many other groups. There's different kinds of aquatic worms. So here's another worm that's related to earthworms, not really related to the things that I had mentioned before. Here are crayfish. So crayfish are arthropods that we can find in fresh waters near us. There are even spider cousins called water mites, which one can find near us. Right. So it might look like a spider, but that's a mite, kind of like the ticks and mites you would find on land, but this one lives in water. And even though it's winter, if you could get to water that was where you could scoop up a little water, like maybe it's near a stream, um, where you can find some running water. That's ice at the top of the screen there. But here you can see, look at all the green algae doing photosynthesis. And once you have the algae, you're going to find water bugs. All right, so there's a bunch of little water bugs that we're going to see here. This is the larvae of a Dobson fly. Here's a larvae of a mayfly. So, food chains have to start somewhere. And in aquatic ecosystems, we have green photosynthetic things, just like we have on land that will use sunlight to store energy. And then we have a number of small animals which will eat them. And then we get to larger animals like fish. So Orange County is just amazing, not only for our land habitats, but just think of the water habitats we have. I mean, we have Delaware and Hudson rivers. I mean, just amazing rivers in addition to all of the smaller rivers like the Wallkill, etc. We have lakes, we have swamps. When you go throughout much of the other world, the rest of the world, much of the United States, if you go out west, most places just don't have the diversity of aquatic habitats that we have. And so therefore we have a great diversity of fish. So let's start off with the most primitive fish we have in our area, the lamprey. It is a jawless fish. So it has a mouth and it can filter feed, all right, but it doesn't have jaws. Here you see it breathing through its gills. Now, lampreys are interesting in that lampreys will come up rivers like the Hudson or the Delaware, lay their eggs, and their eggs then hatch out to be larvae that look like this. All right, so different from the adult fish. And then the larvae will then work their way to the ocean. And lampreys being parasitic, they will then latch onto ocean fish and like parasitize them, suck out their juices, often killing the fish that they latch onto. And then they come back to our area to breed. So come spring, not only are the birds migrating to our area, but the fish are as well. Lampreys are going to swim up the Delaware River, swim up the Hudson River. And I had never known this, but this was kind of fun. You can actually catch them with your bare hand pretty easily. Like they can't bite, they don't have teeth. They don't have jaws. And you can just, once again, it's kind of fun to catch them with your bare hand. So they are not a problem, the ones that I just talked about. They swim up the Delaware, they swim up the Hudson, their larvae go down to the ocean, and if they're going to suck on any fish, they suck on ocean fish, so they don't bother fish in our area. Here's a lamprey as it's swimming up a stream near the Bashakil. However, humans did screw something up in that this looks like the ocean, but it's not. It's a Great Lake. And when I said like we have such diverse aquatic ecosystems, we have the Great Lakes, some of the largest inland bodies of water in the world border the state of New York and surrounding states. And what humans did is we built ways to navigate by boat around Niagara Falls. But when we did, lampreys, which preyed on ocean fish, were now able to reach the Great Lakes where they had never occurred before. And so these canals were built in 1829, 1919, improved. And in 1921, the sea lamprey was first identified in the Great Lakes. Now, this was devastating. Prior to sea lampreys getting to the Great Lakes, a Great Lake had millions of pounds of lake trout that it could produce in a year, just one Great Lake. But after the sea lampreys, it was now down from millions of pounds to hundreds of pounds. A couple of fish called ciscos became extinct because of the sea lamprey um, infestation, and still a lot of the fish caught in the Great Lakes have lamprey marks where they attach to them and were sucking on them. So much so that there are pesticides known as lampricides, which help to keep them in common. Now, there are actually some non-parasitic lampreys as well that live in waterways in New York State, but I don't really think that they're big in our area. So if we look at the diversity of fish, one of the most primitive fish alive today, the lamprey, lives in our area. Bowfin are not quite as primitive, but they're still pretty primitive. They have not changed much since well before the age of dinosaurs. And bowfin can be found in the Bashakil. Bowfin can be found in the Delaware River. I've never seen a live one, despite going fishing and looking for one. But the distinctive thing and how they get their name, this was a dead one I found in the Delaware River, is this long fin on its dorsal side. That's where it gets the name bowfin. All of the other fish in our area are bony fish. We don't have any sharks. And so we've got a diversity here, like eels. Now, eels are interesting because there are three fish I'm going to mention which migrate, just like birds migrate. Lampreys do. They come up from the ocean as adults in order to breed. Shad do as well. Actually, you know what? Let me do shad and I'll do eels last because they're different. So come spring, if you're a fisher person, you might know, ooh, the quote, shad run, that there's a certain time where all of these shad are coming from the ocean, swimming up the Delaware River, and you can go online and see where they are. They're like, ooh, they're in Philadelphia now. Ooh, they're in Easton. They've been a little farther. Ooh, they're in Stroudsburg. Ooh, now they're at the Lackawaxen Bridge in the Delaware, where you have this massive fish swimming up the Delaware River. Now it's hard to swim up the Delaware River. They're swimming against the current. They have to go through rapids, and very often when they get here, they're exhausted, so they're only trying to mate, and many will die. They don't have to, all right, but many do. So if you see a lot of dead fish just floating around in the Delaware, it's in late spring, that's actually not a bad sign. That's just part of nature where these fish came up the river to spawn and were so exhausted that they died afterwards. And we'll be talking about bald eagles and eagle nests in upcoming weeks. Eagles love this because this is right around the time when their eaglets, they've already hatched and are starting to get big. And now you have just all these dead fish just floating to the top of rivers. And so a lot of this is feeding the young eaglets. Right, so shad are a migratory fish. Both lampreys and shadfish swim up the river from the ocean. But then we have eels which swim down. All right. So eels, here's an adult, and it spent maybe 20 years growing up in freshwater. But instead of maturing in the ocean and swimming to freshwater to breed, it matured in freshwater, like the Delaware here. So if you just get a tube with one of the companies along the Delaware that you can rent tubes and you float down, but you have a snorkel mask, you can see this because that's how I got this picture. Just, have a nice relaxing day, float down the Delaware, and you can see eels. Then they breed in the ocean and their young swim back up the river. So some fish like shad and lampreys, it's the adults which swim up the river to get to our area. With eels, it's actually the young which are doing that. We have long fin fish known as pickerel and pike. Pike are a little bit longer than pickerel. Pickerel are more common in New York, but obviously I live in Pike County, Pennsylvania, so obviously there's a longer version of this fish as well. So very fast predators. And then we have other types of fish. I'll just kind of run through them. We've got perch. All right, they often have a little bit of red along their fins. There we go. All right, so we reddish fins. They've got stripes. We have catfish, which are bottom feeders, often coming out at night. Now, there's lots of different types of catfish. So the ones we have in our area are called bullheads, and there's two species of bullhead which occur in this area. Here, because they're going to come out at night, these long sensory structures help them just kind of touch the sediment and sense if something moves, like a little fish or a water bug that they can eat, because at night their vision may not be very helpful. They have some spines in their fins, which can sting you. So if you handle these catfish, your hands can be sore afterwards. Some fish, you might think these are like baby trout or baby bass, but no, they're full grown. There is a group of fish known as minnows. That's the name of the fish, not the name of the baby forms of the fish. And they're not very large, most of them, as adults. There's a bunch of different kinds of those. Some of them are a little bit bigger. All right, so we have shiners are in here somewhere, I think. Oh no, okay. So this one's a little bit bigger than those, all right? So that's what's called a shiner. You can see it, its shiny scales, or what gives it that name. But it is a minnow, as are the carp. Now, carp are huge and they are not native to our area. In fact, very often these are like the biggest fish that you might get to see. And this is at the Audubon Sanctuary at 6.5 Station, where in spring they spawn. And so we had really good luck on a number of our nature walks last spring, where just walking along the trail, you'd see like this big fish thrashing around in the water, and it was a carp. They were introduced from the old world for aquaculture, so that people could fish them for food. And once again, when you look at like what bald eagles are eating, and you know what the herons are eating, carp can be among the group. Two last groups of fish. One would be the sunfish and the bass. Sunfish and bass, and then trout, which I'll get to. Sunfish and bass are actually in the same family, as are a third group, the crappies. So in this one family of fish, we have sunfish, we have crappies, and we have bass. Some sunfish are darker. They are called bluegills, and then some have a lighter color. They are called pumpkin seeds. So here you can see the brighter colors on a pumpkin seed fish. Crappies are kind of like in between the body shape of a sunfish and that of a bass. So all three of these fish are related. Sunfish are a little rounder, bass are a little more elongated, crappies are kind of in the middle. And then we have both largemouth and smallmouth bass. And if you're fishing in a lake, you know, this might be what a lot of the fishermen are really hoping to catch. So bass would be a good lake fish. If you fish in a stream, now you're more likely to be fishing for trout. So just like if you know your birds, you know, hey, I would look for this species of bird in like a swamp versus this species of bird in a thick forest, and maybe a different species of bird in a field, and a different species of bird in a conifer forest. That different habitats attract different species of birds. Trouts need colder, more oxygenated water, so you're likely to find them in rivers and streams rather than lakes. Trout are related to salmon. So just as salmon migrate and swim upstream, so too can trout. And here you can see trout at a fishery. You can actually see them jumping out of the water. So I know that's something we associate with salmon, but salmon or trout are actually the same group. And I know this is weird, so I'll just say it and get out of the way. But salmon and trout are bad words in that salmon are not a group. So salmon number one is more closely related to trout number one than it is to salmon number two. And trout number one was more closely related to salmon number one than it was to trout number two. So we've kind of arbitrarily said trout are one thing and salmon are another, but they're actually all in the same um, group of fish. There are three kinds of trout that live in our area. So we have brown trout, right? So they're kind of a dark brown, and they've got some dark brown spots on them. There are rainbow trout, also known as steelheads, because of the silvery color that they have. So we'll see, you can see kind of a silvery color, but during breeding season, there's like a pinkish line that goes down their body. So here you can see a beautiful rainbow trout. Okay. And then finally, we have brook trout, and they can have a bright red underside here. So there are three species of trout. So it can, yeah. Oh, really? Okay. So, oh, I'm sorry you've had a bad trout experience. Um, so just in our area, and I know I said, I'm sorry, was there a follow-up? Okay, okay. Oh, the golden trout. So that's a great point. I'm actually going to start talking about coral reefs, and just the point that you just made that, you know, in our area we have certain trout out west, you would have a different species. I'm going to make um that point with Caribbean fish in just a little bit. Now, I just I can't stop talking about how wonderful our area is. This is really diverse. That's a big set of fish species that you can find, whether it be in rivers like the Delaware and the Hudson, in Great Lakes, in shallow ponds, in marshes, etc. There are a lot of places on Earth that just don't have as much water as we have, and just don't have the diversity. So, we have this great diversity of aquatic ecosystems here. And once again, all of these fish were then fed by all of these smaller little critters that I mentioned before, so they're all connected. I don't want to go into the birds that then eat the fish because, I'm sure a lot of you know, we're going to be talking about birds even more. We got to talk on bald eagles coming up. We'll be talking about the ducks, which are feeding on aquatic vegetation and aquatic invertebrates. Then we have herons and gulls, etc. So these little critters, they were important in food chains, and then that's where these larger fish are feeding. But then we can talk about otters and bears and eagles and herons, which then feed on this fish. So there are these great aquatic ecosystems in our area. Uh, that being said, there's a lot of great ecosystems, and a lot of them aren't too far from us. And so this is the plug that I always give for looking at coral reefs. I scuba dive, and you do have to go through a little bit of stuff to get certified. However, snorkeling, often isn't as good as scuba diving is. But if you pick the right place, it can be close. All right. So there's a lot of fun places that you could just see great wildlife snorkeling. So here, I'm sorry, I'm looking for my. All right. Where's my shark? Okay. I'll point it out when I find. I thought this was my shark one that I wanted. Where'd it go? Um. Oh, you know what? Do I have something called the Caribbean? I'll bet I'll do. Let me just. I'm looking for one more playlist in my thing. If you were to go to the Florida Keys, just when you go to the Keys, uh, there is a state park there um, where you can snorkel, and you can just see amazing life there. Da, 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 da. Somewhere. All right, I apologize. I got a shark coming, so when I see it, it's a reef shark, so I thought it was there. I'll show you the video when I see it. So you can find these.
I think you just passed it.
I'm sorry.
Go down below bleached coral.
Down below bleach.
Right there. 45
So
seconds.
yeah, this one I think is the one we just looked at. I've got another video so this one I took scuba diving. There was another reef shark I took while I was snorkeling, and I just wanted to make the point that even though it is great to scuba dive, you can actually see a lot of great stuff even if you were just snorkeling. So maybe you don't feel like, oh, I have to go through the certification, etc. A lot of sea turtles you can see just by snorkeling, as I showed you with the Galapagos a week ago, and I'll show you again in just a little bit. So let's say you go down to the Caribbean or Florida, and you go underwater there. Now all of a sudden you realize you are around coral reefs, and you realize how special they are. So coral reefs, just look how dense the wildlife here is around the coral reef. And corals are little tiny animals. So if you were to look at a coral, I know it's easy to think of the big parts. All right, so look, there's a coral. But what am I looking at actually? Actually, there are these tiny little
Right at
animals.
sight.
Okay, so I'm just gonna mute somebody. So there would be a little tiny animal right there, and then another one next to it, then another one next to it, another one next to it. So corals are little tiny animals which are colonial. So if you were to look at a coral close up, right, and you would see all these little holes, that's like an apartment complex, and each little hole is where a little animal lives. So corals are colonial, and they are photosynthetic because there are algae which live inside their cells. So that's an animal living in there, or my little animation. These are animals, but because they have algae living inside them, they actually are serving as the base of a food chain, just like the algae I talked about in freshwater, because they're actually doing photosynthesis. And that's why very often they're so colorful. When you look at coral reefs, just beautiful places, just like, oh, you see all of these colors, because just like the green pigments of plants around us are capturing sunlight, so too are the algae which live inside these coral animals. Corals are the most diverse places to find aquatic life in the ocean. So even there's not a whole lot of coral reef in the ocean. So if you were to take all of the Earth's oceans and ask how much coral reef is there, it would be about the size of New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. That's not big when you consider how big the Pacific Ocean is, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, etc. So coral reefs, they're not a big part of the ocean's floor. Uh, but about a quarter of all ocean fish have to spend at least some of their life here. So this is the most important part. It's like a tropical rainforest on land, where you have just so much more diverse life in coral reefs than you do um, on land. I make a video here where I just try to compare those two. Like if you were to go here on land, you don't expect to find many animals, many birds, etc., because the trees are gone. If you could find an area with trees, oh, that just gives so much more habitat. In the same way, like if you just go to the bottom of the ocean, like here, it's actually kind of boring. Like there's not a whole lot going on. Right, but just as like trees add like this three-dimensional structure, gives all these things like places to hide. If you go to a coral reef, look at the moray eel, look at all of the fish that you're going to see. So you definitely want to snorkel near coral reefs or scuba dive near them, as opposed to just kind of open ocean. You'll just see so much more diversity in the life. I look at all those fish. So coral reefs are precious and we should appreciate them. And that's especially the case since climate change and other things are having such a negative impact. So all over the world, coral reefs are in trouble. Here you see a fish eating the coral. And so you get an idea that once again, photosynthetic organisms can be the basis of food chains. All right. And here I'm making the point that, like on land, you have animals which eat the plants, and then you have animals which then eat the animals that eat the plants. And in the same way, in a coral reef, you have the animals that can eat the corals, and then you have the bigger predators that can eat the animals that eat the corals. So just like a forest is important for land life, it's important for aquatic life. That was a baby fox that couldn't grow up in, an open field, but it can grow up where there's shelter. So here's a coral reef. And look at all these little baby fish which are sheltered here. So coral reefs are the most important parts of the ocean floor with the greatest diversity. And that's why we want so much to preserve them, and why we're so concerned that so many aspects of human activity, including climate change, are having such a negative effect. If you ever get a chance to go to, the Caribbean or Florida, one of the things that you can do is you can go scuba diving at night. All right, so that's cool because just, like in our area, different animals come out at night. So, if you go out at night here, you might see owls, you might see, foxes or bobcats or something that wouldn't come out in the day. And the same thing if you go scuba diving at night. Here's a ray. You'll notice I'm not shining my light directly on it because if you scuba dive at night, you're asked not to do that. These are animals which are nocturnal, and if you shine light, that's a big lobster. If you shine light directly on them, that actually messes them up a little bit. So that's why I'm not doing that. But you can certainly um, enjoy scuba diving here. And before I get back to these, uh, we should can be concerned about natural environments in one way. And I hate that this is not the only reason that I obviously appreciate nature, but we can make money off of this. All right. So, and I meant like Orange County, New York. I mean, just think of all of the places where you can go and enjoy nature, like Bear Mountain. I mean, there's a hotel there. You can stay there, you can eat there, you can rent boats, you can hike there. Then, people buy cameras, they buy binoculars. There's a whole lot of money spent on ecotourism because people enjoy seeing nature in Orange County. You can tube down the Delaware, you can rent, kayaks and canoes. And the same thing here in the Caribbean. This wildlife is worth an awful lot of money if we preserve it. People love to snorkel and go scuba diving. It's an important source of protein. And just as here in Orange County, if we were to preserve our wild spaces, it's good for wildlife, it's good for people too. It's not like we're making a choice. The same thing in the Caribbean, if you preserve the sharks. People love to see sharks. They pay money to see sharks. The scuba money that you get is worth so much more than you would get if you cut off the fins and sold it, to make a shark fin soup. All right, and so we should be concerned about the preservation of this wildlife, not just because we love the wildlife, but because of how important all of this is for us. So if you were to go to the Caribbean, you see different kinds of sharks. You have all of these different types of sea turtles that you can see. And, our attention, like, is important. These things were in danger of extinction. People were hunting them for their meat, for the shells, which were ornamental, but thanks to protections which they are enjoying, that you can have a much better chance of seeing all of this wildlife. Here's an octopus. It's a little hard to make out because of how well they can camouflage, but you'll see it kind of creep away in a little bit. Hopefully, I think you're, getting, this idea that there are similarities between the food chains in freshwater versus the ocean. But there's certainly, this huge number of differences as well. Oh, okay, yeah, great point. Yeah, light is beautiful. And that's an interesting thing because Lark's point about the different tints of light. Like there's different types of algae, like there's red algae, for example. And if you ask why is some algae red, it's because when you go deeper down, the light is different. Um, and so algae have different pigments to absorb different types of light. And when we think a lot of these fish are brightly colored, maybe some of them not so much. And I say that because while like when you probe them on land, it looks like a bright color. Remember that underwater they're already in an environment where there's a lot of blue, etc. So some of the colors which seem bright to us are actually helping them to uh, uh, to to camouflage there. So here are some pictures. This is what I was looking for earlier. I couldn't find it. So here I am. If you see the surface of the water, I think this water is about like 3 feet deep. All right, so I'm just underneath the surface of the water. My head's like probably half out of the water. But here's a shark, and I make that point because even if you said, like snorkeling is such, I'm sorry, scuba diving, it's so involved with the certification, etc. You can see a lot of great things just by sticking your head um, underwater. I like to focus on, the great wildlife that you might see. So this is all from the Caribbean around this. We took our scout troop to a scout camp called Sea Base, which is in the Florida Keys. But there are certainly environmental issues as well. So, as climate changes, that can cause, certain species to have blooms like this brown algae. And if you live in Florida, then you might say, oh, there's this, algae that keeps washing up the shore. It stinks. It's interfering with the boats and the fishing and the recreation. So just like we have problems with invasive species and species having, an artificial bloom, certainly in marine environments, you have as well. We talked about, or at least I mentioned, that there are things like, bald eagles and herons, etc., which are going to depend on these aquatic food chains. And if you go farther south, we got crocodiles, we got alligators. Not only do we have aquatic birds, there's different kinds of aquatic birds. All right, so here we have great blue herons, etc. But roseate spoonbills are beautiful birds that you can find in association with water as you go farther south. A number of ibises, although actually at the Liberty Loop this summer on an Ocas walk, we did actually see a juvenile, which was very unusual. This is more of a Florida bird than it is an Orange County bird, but as climate warms, we might be observing some of the birds start to shift their ranges north. One of the things I'm still trying to learn um, is once you get used to um, aquatic life in one part of the world. Like I've done a bit of scuba diving in the Caribbean. But then you go to a different part of the world, like this is from Baja California. All of a sudden now you're seeing things very different. And you're seeing, oh, sea lions. The Caribbean certainly has a great diversity of aquatic life, all right, but not sea lions. And so these sea lions will get most of their nutrition from fish, although they can eat other aquatic invertebrates as well. And so when we talk about aquatic food chains, obviously, then some parts of the world have these large members that others don't. Uh, you'd make the point where there's different types of trout throughout the world. Here's a different type of cormorant, different from the type of cormorant which we have our um, in our area. If you were to go scuba diving or snorkeling in Baja California, all right, now you're in the Gulf of California, and or I'm sorry, my fault, the Sea of Cortez / Gulf of California. Um, and you would see different things than you see in the Caribbean. So you wouldn't see this thing in the Caribbean. You say, oh, sergeant majors, I've seen them in the Caribbean, but this is a different species. So you'd say, aha, that just like there's different species of warbler or woodpecker as you go throughout the world, there are different types of species. What the? The macroinvert. So great question. So let's just talk about this sergeant major, just because I happen to be up here, then we'll get to invertebrates. Uh, it was about 2 to 4 million years ago that Panama was raised from the bottom of the ocean and fused the two Americas. So there used to be one fish called the Sergeant Major. But as of about 2 million years ago, they were no longer able to breed with each other. The ones in the Caribbean were isolated from the ones in the Sea of Cortez and and so therefore they couldn't interbreed, and so then they became two species. And as time goes on, we see more and more of that. If you were to go scuba diving or snorkeling in Baja California, you see corals, but then you'd be struck, you're like, yeah, look at that weird coral. I've never seen that in the Caribbean. Look at these guys. I've never seen that in the Caribbean. And let me get to my favorite ones. Like, okay, let's look at starfish. All right. So there are starfish in the Caribbean, but not this one. All right. In fact, some of these are actually called like the Cortez starfish or the Cortez sea urchin, indicating that the Sea of Cortez between Baja California and mainland Mexico, this is the only place where you can see this. So here's a big starfish that's eating a coral. So here's a coral and here's a starfish, which is essentially slowly eating the little coral animals. But this would only be found in the Sea of Cortez. When you look at sea urchins, there's different sea urchins, and then some of these would only be found in Baja California. And so while they're like, for example, raccoons, are very widespread. They're generalists. But if you go to different parts of, say, the United States, you might find one species in the East that you don't find in the West. In the same way, Lark, to your question, yeah, there are more macro invertebrates that one could find throughout different regions of the world. But then for example, this little fish is called the Cortez wrasse. We do have wrasse in the Caribbean, but not this species. It would be a different species. Here's a little invertebrate called a sea pen that just kind of sits and soaks up the water. I have never seen one in the Caribbean. So I think if you go birding, You might say, hey, I see the same birds as I saw somewhere else in another habitat. But then you say, ooh, here I am in a different habitat. I also see some different ones. I think you would say the same with both the fish and the macro invertebrates. This one, um, question was on starfish. So to get a little graphic here, starfish, let's go back to here. They evert their stomach. So if a starfish goes on top of a coral, or if it grabs a mollusk by the shell and pries it open, that's what those arms are for, to pry it open, then out of the mouth comes the stomach. So we put food in our stomachs and we digest it there, where starfish actually kind of almost eject their stomachs and then all of its acid, etc. So they will digest the clam while it's still in the shell, or they're digesting the little coral animals as they sit on top of it, and then they suck up the good stuff from there. So that's how they eat. And wait, hold on. I just want to make sure I get the question. Does the starfish kill the growth of coral? So I don't think it touches it. I don't think that's it. I think they're trying to eat it is the thing that is most dangerous to them. Um, Lark, your question on like, does human interference affect them? Well, so climate change does, and there is a bacteria right now in the Sea of Cortez which is wiping out the starfish. It's called sea star wasting syndrome, and it's because the ocean waters are warmer than they used to be. So here in Orange County, we talk about is the changing climate having a negative impact on different types of wildlife. The same is true in aquatic environments as well. We could have that same conversation. As I mentioned with the Galapagos, and I'll kind of go back to the Galapagos and end there. Um, the larger animals now obviously have longer lifespans. I mean, some live decades or maybe even a century, and need more food. And so they're going to be more sensitive to change. All right. So if currents change, which change the distribution of fish and the nutrients which feed the algae, well, that's going to affect the whales. All right, because whales need an awful lot of food to support this body. So when the water changes in a way that's going to affect the distribution of all of those smaller critters that I mentioned, then at some point then the bigger critters are being affected as well. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That was I want the playlist on the Galapagos, which I have too many Galapagos to do this. So let me just I'll wrap up then. But then just I had mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. If you were to look at this cormorant and its little tiny wings, you realize, oh right, that's the flightless cormorant, which only exists on the Galapagos Islands, and not actually only on some of them. So not only does it depend on the smaller critters in the aquatic food chains, but it's now really sensitive to the conditions just in a small part of the world where it lives. The same could be said of the marine iguanas, which was right here. So only found in the Galapagos. And as a final example of just how everything is connected, when we shift between El Nino and La Nina years, this affects the currents which pass the Galapagos Islands. And during the La Nina years, the currents coming from the cold water near Antarctica bring all of these nutrients with them and the algae bloom. So I was able to visit the Galapagos in a La Nina year. Look at all of that green. Oh, so these marine iguanas, they are everywhere and they are loving it. All right, there's just so much food for them. But then when it shifts to El Nino years, now the currents go in a different direction and the ecosystem kind of falls apart because without the nutrients in the water, then we don't have those photosynthetic algae, you don't have the small fish, and so you can't support the marine iguanas, which are eating the algae. You can't support the Galapagos sea lion, which is eating the fish, or the Galapagos cormorant, and so lots of numbers drop suddenly. And so the big takeaway is we have such an amazing diversity of aquatic life on the planet, and a lot of it is specific to only certain regions. All right, so the Galapagos has different life than Baja California, which has different life from the Caribbean, which has different life from the freshwaters of Orange County, which would be different from elsewhere. Even in Orange County, what you find in the Delaware is different from the Hudson, is different from the Great Lakes, is different from the lakes and the ponds. And all of it is tied together. All right, we started off with, the smallest critters, which are actually the base of the food chains, and that's true whether you're here in Orange County and you have to, look at these little algae and the water bugs. But that was also true of the marine life because the coral reefs and those aquatic fish and invertebrates, they are important there. Climate change is affecting our life here in Orange County. It's also affecting marine life uh, um, elsewhere as well. Thank you, Megumi. And about okay. So tell you what, I was actually talking about avian flu in the beginning. Let me wrap this up. I'll bring up avian flu um, again to answer your question. So I'd like to thank you for listening in. We don't often get to see this aquatic life. You might have to get like a little net to scoop up some of the water bugs, or you might have to go out fishing. But nevertheless, we do have this great aquatic life in our area. There's diverse habitats in Orange County and New York, and a great diversity there. And if you ever get to travel, by all means, if you're in the Caribbean, just go to many of the centers, which will say, "Hey, we'll take you out snorkeling," or "Hey, we'll take you out scuba diving for the day." It's really worth it. I will answer the question about avian flu in just a minute. Does anyone have any other questions? Oh, wow, that's awesome. Okay. Well, then, apart from avian flu, I'd like to thank all of you for joining. I hope all of you, have minimal shoveling that you need to do and can stay safe. Thank you so very much. Um, and next week, I'm sorry, I should be better about this. I know I have the schedule somewhere. I think I apologize. I forget what next week's topic is.
Amphibians.
Amphibia. Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And then bald eagles would be after that. So here we're starting to look at spring. We're in the season where amphibians are going to start seeking out ponds where they can mate. And then eagles any week now are going to start coming back into our area and fixing up their nests. Because of the question of this, if you get the Audubon newsletter, this is actually an article I wrote that's coming out in the newsletter, which should be out in a week, where, yes, about a month ago, a number of us were noticing a lot of dead birds, dead Canada geese here, dead crows there. The DEC was very interested. They asked us to report it. There is a DEC reporting form. Tests were done, and it is confirmed that this is avian flu. This article that I have coming out this month is kind of an introduction to it. I'll in the following month, I'm in the midst of writing it now, a deeper dive into what avian flu is and why it's dangerous, because it doesn't just affect birds, it can affect dairy cattle. It can affect a number of mammals, including humans. Humans have gotten sick from avian flu. Humans have died from avian flu. Um, and so certainly is something to watch. The question that began the talk was, what happens if you were to scavenge this? Like bald eagles can scavenge carcasses, as can coyotes, foxes, bobcats. Well, the answer is you can get avian flu from eating a contaminated bird. So unfortunately, we may lose some eagles because they ate infected geese. We may lose some coyotes and foxes, etc. So it is certainly, oh, thank you. And Charlotte, I'll give that in just a great, I think, just let me finish this. And so there is a concern for all of the wildlife in our area, but there's also potential human cost as well. So that was a great thing to be worried about. The DEC does have information on a page on avian flu. And like I said, the Audubon newsletter this month and next month will have some about that. The talk that I'm giving next Monday, I will also be giving um, at Meek on the first. So the same talk on two different days, if one's more convenient than the other. The Mamakating Environmental Education Center is in Wurtsboro, near the Bashkill, an absolutely wonderful environmental center. And so this is the time of year where it's the best time to start thinking about amphibians. And so that talk hopefully introduces you to their great diversity. Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Sure.
Um, Hi, it's Kate Schmidt. Thank you. And
Hi,
I'm
Kate.
sorry again
Yeah.
about my lack of muting. It's been a
No, that's
crazy day. I just saw an eagle
oh, good
traveling
for you.
westbound on 17 over the Wallkill, basically,
Good
west of
for
the
you.
Wallkill. It was incredible how low it came to the highway. And it just flew and it went
Hmm.
on its way. Um, I did see one of the deceased geese. I saw that die over the Christmas bird count. He was alive
Mhm.
one day, and the next day he was exactly in the ice, like you said. I'd like to know more about the amphibian training at MEEC. I just texted that person,
Sure.
Charlotte. I had offered a training on campus last year for the amphibian migration, so I'd really love to know more about that because I was going to bring it back to campus. So it'd be good to talk about that. And then lastly, I wanted to know if you had anything to say about all the iguanas. I like to kill invasive species because I know how bad they are, but I'm really struggling at seeing how much the Floridians are enjoying it. I know we have to kill them. It was easier for me to kill them while they were cold stunned, but I just wondered if you had anything to say or if anyone had anything to say because once it got warm again, I just wondered how they killed them, if you knew any inside information.
I do not have inside information. I've seen a couple late night shows where they're talking about iguana pizza and all. So,
Okay.
but that doesn't make me an expert. So I will go no further uh into that. And I'm sure that there's, as with anything, there's a diversity that I think, how there are people in Florida who are extremely concerned about the nature. I mean, they manage the Everglades, which is an incredible national park. But then there might be people who are less interested in wildlife. So I'm sure, the treatment of wildlife is not one, thing. The environmental training that you mentioned. So I'll give my 2 cents, and Charlotte, feel free to jump in. I usually give a talk that just says, here's all of this great, all the different species and how you can recognize them. And then what Meek organizes is that on the warm, rainy nights in spring, you'll sign up on a list and you come down, and there's a um, a training on how we can help the spotted salamanders and other um, amphibians safely cross the road so that they can go to their vernal pools, mate, lay eggs. We count the number of species which we find, and so that's the program which will then continue throughout spring. Charlotte, did you want to add anything?
yeah, no, just you covered most of it there. Just the training is this Sunday at 1 p.m. in Woodsboro, Mamakating Environmental Education Center. Our address is 762 South Road, so we're just off 17 there a little bit. If you haven't been yet, and yeah, you'll be basically if you go to the training and get added to like a text message chat. And whenever we think the amphibians are going to be out, you'll get a little notification. We all meet on Haven Road and just help the little guys cross the street.
You know what? In my head, I'm like, yeah, it's in March. It's in March. I forgot that's next Sunday. Thank
Yeah,
you,
so
Charlotte.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's less than a
Yeah, it's
week.
like
And it talked out
it's
really well because like you mentioned I didn't realize it was the same talk it was happening, but I was like, oh no, this is perfect timing.
yeah. Yeah, and that's why I did it like around the same time. So,
Okay.
and Kate, I'd be glad to help you out at the college to coordinate any activities there. I don't know spots in our area which are as good as the South Road for spotting the spotted salamanders and the like.
Well, that's was always one of the problems, and the state DC doesn't want to advertise it because of other problems nefarious. Um, but when we did offer it on campus last year, no students came. It was in the evening. outsiders came. So if anyone has any advice of how to try and get them to participate, please let me know. And maybe we could just talk. I'd have to move quickly
Hey,
because I'm
let's
assuming,
talk.
Charlotte, it's the D.
If you wanted to do something either right before next week's talk or right after, if that helps promote something, by all means, we can talk later.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're trying to
Charlotte,
get
you
students involved, as someone who used to be a student not terribly long ago, free food is always a great motivator.
yes, and DEC brings free food. They brought oranges and snacks last year. I didn't include that in the invite. Are you dealing with Laura Heady?
No, I'm not familiar.
So DEC is not training. You're doing your own training?
Yeah, we do. I think Jackie, our director, I think she would know more like the DEC contacts and everything like that to
Oh, okay.
coordinate. So if you want to talk to her about any of that in specific, if you just I think she's on holiday at the minute, but Meek opens back up on Wednesday. If you want to call in, see if you can get a hold of her, and if you want to talk to her about
I'll
specifics
I'll
about
I'll start
about
with
that.
DEC because they're not going to want to replicate their efforts. So I'll
Yeah,
see if they need it.
yeah.
But
I
Meek
think if I remember,
Meek does work with the DEC. The Bashakil
yeah,
is DEC, managed by the DEC.
yeah,
So
we
Yes.
they're
hand
not
our
separate entities entirely.
Gotcha.
yeah. I think we're like just, if I remember correctly, Jackie will give you more specifics. Like we're just in like the border area where they're usually trying to track that kind of stuff. So we get like their forms and everything like that that we fill out and then send in to them so they have the numbers.
Okay. Yeah, all the forms. Good. All right. Well, thank you. I'm sorry to keep you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh no, you're
And
fine.
Kate, we can talk. Everyone, it was wonderful to have you, and thank you for your interest in the great biodiversity which we have in our area.
Thank you for
Have
the
a,
wonderful
Thank you.
presentation.
have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Good night.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Take care.